An announcement later on today from President Trump, a huge announcement, many say, that will recognize the capital of Israel as Jerusalem. And then, I guess, in a way to put it, anticipate the move of the U.S. Embassy that is currently in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem in maybe the next few years. We'll see how long it actually takes. Joining us right now to talk about this, Gregg Roman. He's Chief Operations Officer for the Middle East Forum. Gregg, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Talk about this move that is expected from President Trump later on today. This is not just a decision that he made lightly. This is something that's been talked about for years now, correct?
Right. This is a decision that 3 previous presidents had the opportunity to execute, but President Trump is the only one who actually kept his promise from his campaign to move the embassy. In the course of normal diplomatic decision-making, there is no other foreign capital where a U.S. diplomatic mission does not sit outside of Jerusalem. And you could attribute that to this decades-long conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians. But I think that what Donald Trump has done is he has flipped the peacemaking paradigm on its head by saying it's incumbent upon the Palestinians to push forward towards peace rather than just always asking the Israelis to capitulate on their national security position. And this policy move is indicative of that exact strategy. It's up to the Palestinians to get their own state now, not for Israel to just toss them a bone to get their identity rejected instead.
Gregg, everything I'm reading here when it comes to the New York Times and the Washington Post is that the president is risking turning the Middle East, which was this peaceful, tranquil place where peace was everywhere. He's gonna turn all of that upside down now.
Right, and I think that what you have here is that, just looking at the emblematic declaration of 3 days of rage by the Palestinian Authority and the Hamas terror organization, it's as if though there was 362 days of quiet before this announcement was being made. Just on the face of it, I think that President Trump is probably the first American leader in the last, I'd say, since the Clinton administration, or even the first Bush, to not allow himself to be blackmailed by the Arab street and by foreign dictators. We should never allow our sovereign decision-making to be outsourced to the Arab street or to any other third party. And I think that the emblematic role of what President Trump will declare today at 1 p.m. of recognizing Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the Jewish people and of the state of Israel, and then announcing he has intention to move the embassy there, is the first step in realigning and readjusting the U.S. foreign policy and decision-making as it pertains not just to the Israelis and Palestinians, but to the wider Middle East.
Well, we know that... keep going, I'm sorry.
No, and I think, you have all these different, moves that are also going on parallel to this. It's not as if though this embassy decision is being made in a vacuum. You have the Saudis and the Emiratis getting closer to the Israelis. The Egyptians and the Americans are coordinating stronger against the next push against ISIS now in Libya and in the Sinai Peninsula. The Turks are finally being revealed for their rogue actor that they actually are, openly condemning U.S. policy now. And I think that President Trump is starting a new chapter of American involvement in that region, and it's probably the most correct chapter that we've had for a long while.
We know that some Arab leaders will be very upset about this. I think the leader of Turkey has already sounded off, and I'm sure there will be others. What about some of our other, allies and friends, in Europe? What do you think their reaction will be?
I think that when you look at European leaders, they're subject to a lot more domestic threats as it relates to their Islamist populations that are living there, rather than the United States, which is separated with the secure boundary of the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific. When it comes to other, progenies of Russia, whether it be in Eastern Europe or minor allies like those in China, I think that you find yourself just trying to have a seat at the table of negotiating the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. But insofar as it's going to disrupt American relations with other foreign capitals, I don't think that's going to happen. You may have condemnation, but then they'll resume the normal course of business tomorrow. So, I think that the surprise, which is being articulated by many foreign leaders, is one where they weren't not ready for this policy change by Trump. But if I had to make a decision between going with the Arab Street or with U.S. diplomatic decision-making, I'd probably go with the latter.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at this actual embassy move. From my understanding, the president will sign off on this waiver that every other president has signed off that will delay any kind of move for 6 months. As I'm guessing they've got to get all the logistics together. There's not a lot of real estate. I brought this up earlier. There's not a lot of real estate.
There is.
Oh.
There is. The U.S. on January 17th, 1989, signed a 99-year lease for $1 a year for a 7-acre plot in Jerusalem for the location of a future embassy.
Really?
Beyond that, they also have the U.S. consulate, which they could presumably start transitioning embassy staff towards. But just a general infrastructure and building project and getting all the security ramifications, it'll take 3 to 4 years to actually get this in play. You can't just erect an embassy overnight.
True. But
there is a way to do it, and I think that there's been a plan since the 1995 Jerusalem Capital Recognition Act was passed and by Congress and signed by Bill Clinton.
If the president announces this today, and it takes 3 to 4 years to actually implement and to get an embassy open, is there a possibility that if the president decides he's not going to run for re-election for whatever reason, or if he loses, that another president could come in and stop all of this?
It's possible, but I think that prophesizing has never been a good policy-making mechanism. So I'd rather focus on today and then look at the way in which it could be implemented so that it becomes a permanent decision rather than having an intractable assumption that this can be reversed 3 years from now.
What, I guess, in the real world, what ramifications will this actually have?
I think that at the worst-case scenario, you'll have some Arab and Islamic leaders get cool on their recent closeness with Israel. I don't really think there'll be a price for U.S. policymakers. There may be riots and disruptions at U.S. diplomatic missions across the region. The Palestinians may decide that they no longer see an interest in having a diplomatic relationship with the United States, but if they do that, they'll sacrifice around 40% of their annual budget. So there's more implications for Arab outrage for the Arabs than there is for the U.S.'s position in the region.
And we're visiting with Gregg Roman, by the way, Chief Operations Officer for the Middle East Forum here on the Chad Hasty Show. Earlier, I brought up, the lines that, and I'm sure you've seen them in the papers as well, that the president's jeopardizing peace and peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. This two-state solution that we've heard about over and over for decades now. I don't believe for a minute that Trump is hurting that process. Do you think that hurts this process? And is there actually a process going on right now to try and bring peace into that region?
Chad, this is going to be my last question. I've got another interview in about a minute. But just really quick, I think that this helps the process. It helps realize that the Palestinians is a new sheriff in town. This is no longer about Israel capitulating. This is about the Palestinians have to meet the Israelis halfway. I think that U.S. policymaking is done in such a way where they recognize that Israel is permanent, it's real, it's not going anywhere, and it's time that the Palestinians come on board to that soon. The sooner they recognize that fact, that there's a Jewish state living side by side with them, the sooner they'll get their own state. The longer they live in a fantasy land, the more their people will suffer. Great.
Greg, appreciate your time today. We'll visit with you sometime in the future, we hope.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. That's Gregg Roman, Chief Operations Officer for the Middle East Forum. Chad Hasty Show, KFYO.